up with everybody in the chat. We've got people from all over the place. We've got quite a fair few from America in. We've got Manchester, we've got Wales, we've got Canada, we've got Amsterdam, Valencia, the Netherlands. I mean, literally all over.
How fantastic and how wonderful to see you all here. And I know that we have about a minute to go until we kick off, but can I take this opportunity to say thank you to Jermaine, who supports me so absolutely beautifully, and happy Administrative Professionals Day to her. As you can see, she handles everything along with my amazing team back in the office, and we've got a couple of them with us here today, Sophie Douglas and William Brown, who both will be chatting away as we're going through. But I really couldn't do what I do without Jermaine, so I did just want to take a moment to do that. Thank you very much indeed for all your support. Listen, everybody, how amazing is it that we get to have a conversation with executives for the very first time? I'm doing more and more of this in person, and I am so delighted that you're all here. We have had over 800 people sign up for this. I know a lot of them are going to be getting the recording, and I suspect a lot of assistants will have signed up so that they're able to send it to their executives afterwards to say, this is where I'd love to get to in terms of us working together. But I am going to kick off by sharing my slides, and then I'm going to get going because I have a lot that I want to tell you about. So where are we? Here we go. Here's our opening slide. Just wanting to check that you're all able to see it. Are we good, Jermaine? Fabulous. All right. So for the next hour then, I am going to be talking to you about, as executives, how you can empower yourself by partnering properly with your administrative professional. And let me begin. So I'm going to begin by introducing myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lucy Brazier. I'm the CEO of Marcham Publishing. We publish Executive Support magazine. We travel all over the world trading and running conferences, but that is only part of the story, because the other part of my life is that I spend an inordinate amount of time talking to executives, talking to HR departments, talking to organizations about how they best utilize their assistants. And I'm going to come on to talk about that more a little moment. And you can see that so far this journey has taken me to 60 plus countries, and we're still counting. This year there are several more going to be added onto that list. And it really is my mission in life to make sure that the assistants are given the work that they are capable of doing. And that's so much more in most instances than they are getting at the moment. And if you needed any more credibility, this is a photo from last year. I was very proud to be awarded my OBE. When you look at my name, you'll see it has OBE after us. And for those of you who aren't in the UK, you won't know what that means. But an OBE is the Officer of the British Empire Award, and I was awarded it by the late Queen, actually. But because of COVID, it was the King that presented it to me. So I went to Windsor Castle, and in the background, you can see, bless them, my parents who were there with me. And I got that for services to office professionals. So hopefully that gives me a little bit of credibility with you all. So let's begin then by thinking about why organizations employ assistants. And I would love for you to put into the chat box why you think it is that organizations employ assistants. Can you do that for me? Still lots of people joining. To keep the trains running. I love that. To get things done. Efficiency, taming the chaos, to keep the executives sane. All those things. Amazing. Of course you're there. Yes, Amy, you got it in one. The reason the organization employs assistants is to give you back your time. It's to give executives back time. It's to make sure that every minute of your time is best spent, and therefore every dollar of your salary is best spent. We're going to come on to talk about that more in a moment. But very often when I talk to executives, when I talk to HR, when I talk to the assistants themselves, this is not clear, and it is the best starting point. The assistant role is in somewhat of an evolution or revolution, whichever way you want to look at it. And to me, I wanted to explain the why before I explain the how, so that you really understand why we're where we are. And you know, the beginning of a revolution is in reality the end of a belief. And what is the belief about administrative professionals? Well, for many people, it's still this, that it's reactive, that it's task-based. You know, your assistants work in silos, so they work right the way across the organization. They belong to all sorts of different departments. And what that means is that they very rarely get together to talk about what best practice is or how they could do a better job. And very often, I think organizations miss them because they don't have their own function or their own department. There is no leadership. There is no roadmap for how they arrive at excellence. They're seen as subservient. Maybe they are seen as belonging to or being managed by the executive. And certainly it's important to understand that the assistants are actually employed by the organization, not by the executives, with a very specific role in mind. Assistants are seen as not meant to be questioning things, and very often they sit outside of the core business. Many still see them as just the assistant. And in reality, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we have over 160 job titles in this marketplace, and that causes enormous confusion. That's before you look at things in translation. So whilst in the UK, you might have a PA at a lower level and an EA at a higher level, in America, a PA is somebody who looks after somebody of high net worth or a celebrity. In Europe, the term is more likely to be management assistant. And you can have a PA, by the way, in the UK who's working on reception, but a PA could also be somebody who's looking after a CEO. So you can see already why there's so much confusion. And all this leads to assistants feeling excluded. There is no leadership. It's seen very much as a job and not a career. Most assistants get no training. When I ask the assistants I'm training whether this is the first time they've ever had admin specific training, usually most of the room's hands go up. We have no consistent job descriptions, no performance review. Rewards are based on tenure, the amount of time they've served with the company rather than performance. The opportunity for promotion relies on the executive getting promoted. You know, I recently spoke to an assistant who is working for a company that employs over 20,000 people, and she's supporting the CEO. He just resigned and she's going because the new one has got somebody they're bringing with them. Just think of all that knowledge that's walking out of the business. There's no career framework. That means they're misunderstood, they're underutilized, and they're undervalued. And just think of all that untapped potential. This is deeply depressing, isn't it? It'll get happy in a moment. They sit outside of the core business. They have a career ceiling. I very recently interviewed a whole heap of really top level assistants. It took me 25 hours of interviews, but there were very few who felt that they could get promoted still. In order to be promoted, they'd need to move into a different role, and most want to stay in administration. There's no budget for them. There are no goals or KPIs. They're very much seen as a resource, not talent. And that means that as a group, they are treated with a lack of respect. So I want to talk to you very briefly about a couple of changes that have happened in the last 12 years, which means that this career has shifted, and that for many assistants, it isn't tea and typing anymore. They're now strategic partners within the organisation and what that actually means to you. And so we're going to start with a very brief history lesson, which says that initially this was a male career. I don't know if you knew that, but you were secretaries, assistants were secretaries, and secretary means keeper of secrets. So after the beginning of the Second World War, the men went off to fight and the women took over. And they were so amazing at it that now it's 98% female as a profession. It is a fifth of the world's working population that works in admin. That's about 500 million of them who are working in administration. So it is the biggest employer of women in the world. Now, they were getting along doing their tea and typing and the things that you would expect of a traditional secretary role. But over the years, obviously, they took on more things as organizations understood that they could give them different things to do. But it was 12 years ago when Lehman's, the investment bank, went bang that everything really changed, because many businesses got rid of layers of middle management, and then they asked the assistants to step up and go and do some of that work. And of course, there's nothing more permanent than temporary. And so we now have 73% of assistants who are doing events. We have about 52% who are doing HR, and a whole heap of them that are involved in everything from marketing to social media to finance. So the assistants really stepped into a different realm, and for the first time we saw heads of business support or directors of administration. And of course that's absolutely correct, because if it's a fifth of the world's working population, you should have somebody on the board representing the administrative community at your organisation. I want to talk about Belbin for a moment. And the reason I want to talk about Belbin is because it positions very clearly why your organisation needs assistance to support you. And Belbin, Meredith Belbin, put together a psychometric test back in the 1950s, which talked about teams and where people fit in teams. And when you take it, it's very, very clear where the assistants sit and where the executives sit. So let's look at the executives first. And the executives tend to fall into shaper and plant and resource investigator. So our shapers then are the ones who are quite autocratic, and they don't like to be told no, and they are quite parental in their management style. It's my way or the highway. And if someone comes to see you and you're bored by bullet point 3, you're probably a shaper. So it's be quick, be fast, be done, get out. Then we have our plants, and our plants are really clever people. They're great at coming up with new products, new systems, but maybe not so great at communication. They are the people who are, think techie people, the ones that you should lock in a room and not let near people because they're not very good with people. So if that's you, you're a plant. And then finally, our resource investigators, and they're hugely charismatic. They lead people forward. They are the ones that people love to follow, but they can't complete or finish anything if their life depends on it. And your assistant probably is regularly chasing you down the corridor saying, come back, you were due in a meeting 10 minutes ago. So those are your 3 executives. On the other hand, you have your assistants, and your assistants are falling under team worker, completer finisher, and implementer. So your team workers are the ones who do the communication piece. They are the ones who join the dots. So if they have a shaper, so the quite autocratic one as a manager, they will be saying to people, pay no heed to them, that's just who they are. They'll be smoothing things over, making sure that the team is working nicely together. If they have a plant as their executive, they will probably be doing the translation piece, literally making sure the communication is correct. So those are your team workers. Then your completer finishers, they do the detail, they dot the I's, they cross the T's, they love the detail. In fact, they love the detail so much that they don't like to delegate to anybody else. And finally, you have your implementer. Now listen, if I tell you that when we test assistants and when we test everybody, a high score for Belbin is usually somewhere between 12 and 15. Assistants score 25 to 30 normally on implementer, and that's the process and procedure piece. They are extraordinary at it. So for me as a CEO, I'm forever coming up with new ideas for things I'd like to do. And usually my team goes pale at that point because they know it's going to be them that have to take it and implement it. That is what your assistant is absolutely phenomenal at. So maybe start thinking about different ways that they can be utilized for the process and procedure piece. So on the one hand, you have the executives world over here. On the other side, you have the assistants world over here. Totally different skill sets, but when you meet in the middle, it's like one perfect employee for the organization. It's like 2 sides of the coin. And when you get it right, it's like one of you breathes in and the other one breathes out. Now, the second change, of course, is the fact that we've got the 4th industrial revolution, and you will probably have seen the headlines that say the robots are coming and they want the job of the assistant. You will have read all sorts of things about the fact that the administrative profession is decreasing and that it isn't going to be a job of the future. It is nonsense. Let me talk you through that. Here is a quote from the Wall Street Journal from one of their latest articles. Executives lose a coveted status symbol, their assistants. A dedicated admin is now a rare perk as companies cut jobs and technology automates many tasks. I don't think your assistants appreciate being thought of as a perk, really. It gets worse. Who has a one-on-one assistant these days? The EA ranks have thinned 63% over the past couple of decades, according to the Bureau of Labour Statistics. I'm going to come on to them in a minute. Technology automates many administrative tasks, and companies can save money by telling executives to share assistants or to file those dreaded expense reports themselves. Quite how it saves money having you spending an hour of your salary doing expenses rather than handing it to the assistant is something that I'm really not clear on. Because simple economics says to me that if both of you are capable of doing something, it should be them that is doing it. Because your time needs to be freed up to do the things that you're paid your salary to do, which is to go and do the things the organisation is paying you to do. Let me talk to you for a minute about the US Bureau of Labour Statistics, and you will know that these organizations, this in the United States, but right the way across the world, every country has their own. These organizations are all about where we get the data from and where we benchmark when we're looking at what we pay people and how we promote people. And the Bureau of Labour Statistics last updated their data for assistants in 2018. The next time they are going to update their data is 2028, and we have a 2-week window in 2024 to send them the information that we need, and then they will decide whether they're going to update it or not for 2028. All very interesting, except for they keep getting quoted, and what they're saying is that there is over 60% of assistants that are disappearing. Now, firstly, they only measure one level of assistant. They have one level of assistant, and that is reactive task-based assistants, who are the secretaries of old. Anybody who's doing anything in the least bit strategic gets lumped in with management. But of course, if you're looking at artificial intelligence, if you can do something twice in the same way, it can be automated. So that reactive task-based stuff is shifting. But it's interesting that Glassdoor is saying that the administrator is one of the top 10 jobs of the future. And that is because the ones that are moving into being more strategic and who have the very human skills that allow you to free up your time to get on with more of what you need to do are of course growing. It's never been more important for executives to be doing the things they're actually paid to do. And finally, let me talk to you about the World Economic Forum, who are also telling us that the job is in decline. If you look at the top 10 fastest declining jobs, according to last year's Future of Jobs report, you'll see at number 5, it says administrative and executive secretaries. But I found this hugely confusing because when you look at the top 10 skills that they're saying are the most relevant for 2023, this reads like a skill set to me for assistants. So, of course, me being me, I managed to get hold of somebody at the World Economic Forum and talk to the person who put the report together. And what they told me was that their data is not actually based on data at all. What it's based on is them asking the companies that they work with what they think. And I suspect that those companies are reading the Wall Street Journal and looking at the data from the Bureau of Labour Statistics. So in actuality, we are creating a picture of this profession being in decline, whereas really it's never been more relevant. If you look at the top 10 skill priorities for 2027, you can see they're exactly the same as the ones I just showed you, other than at number 3, AI and big data. And that, by the way, is something assistants are investing an enormous amount of time in learning right now. And number 8, which, you know, probably most assistants won't get involved in, but 9 out of 10 ain't bad. And everything I'm reading in the press says that in the future, we're going to value those human skills. We used to value people who retained facts. We thought they were very clever. They knew the history of every president going back to the beginning and what dates they served. They were really smart. They should be the leaders. But actually, when you look at it, we can now ask Alexa, we can ask Siri, we can ask Google, and those will give us the facts. What we need are the human skills, and look at these. So many of them apply to the assistants: attention to detail, emotional intelligence, service orientation, problem solving, persuasion, taking the initiative, critical thinking, flexibility. It sounds like an assistant to me. I want to sidestep for a moment. I am going to move on to some practical things in a minute, but this is the last piece where I want to talk to you about the why, and some of the things that are in place that can help you. And the Global Skills Matrix was developed by the World Administrators Alliance over a period of 6 years between 2015 and 2021. Now, let me tell you about the World Administrators Alliance. It's the kind of G7 for the profession. It is the heads of associations from countries all over the world. Every couple of years, they get together to work out what it is that the profession needs in order to make sure that we are seen as a career and not just a job. So we started by doing a piece of research, which was one of the biggest pieces of research that had ever been done into this profession. And look at the stats, they're really shocking that came out of that. 58% of administrators felt underutilized. 73% felt that their organizations didn't understand the role or the potential impact of using them properly, and 60% felt that there was little or no opportunity for career progression within their organizations. Most assistants don't get promoted unless their executive gets promoted. It's not based on their own skills and competencies. And goodness me, can you imagine if any other area of your business was feeling underutilized like that? HR would be having an absolute fit and trying to work out how they could better utilize them. So we clearly had a problem. And we decided that what we would do as the Alliance was to put together a career framework for assistants, which would allow organizations to understand how to best utilize them, how to performance review them, and how to make sure that excellence was achieved at each level. So the purpose of this document was to look at the role as a career and not just a job. We wanted to drive discussion on career pathways and on performance and on salary expectations. Although if you go look at the Global Skills Matrix, you'll see there aren't any salaries in there, because obviously, even if you're just looking from city to city, it can change. The salaries are different dependent on where you're based. It's about structuring skills training for personal development and for adding organizational value. It supports recruitment and role profiling. So HR departments are absolutely loving it because we're identifying the skills that are needed at each level for an assistant, as well as looking at the competencies that they need and the kind of tasks they're able to do. And the Global Skills Matrix has also accelerated the development of internationally recognized qualifications and certifications. So there's a lot more training out there which your assistants can take in order to upskill. And we decided that we would just have 5 levels. We wouldn't give them job titles. And the reason for that, if you think about it, is because when we go back to the 162 job titles, it's very difficult to map them all. So we wanted for your assistants to be able to map themselves to it, to see themselves in it, but we wanted to make it really simple for you to look at it and go, oh, that's what I need, or that's where my assistant sits, or maybe those skills gaps are missing, so they need some training. So let me talk you through this really briefly, and you'll see at the bottom the website. You can download it for free. It's the Administrative Professions gift to you. So at a level 1, we have entry level, which is our reactive first role or returner. That's where you're learning how to work in an office. You remember what that's like? How do I dress? How do I answer the phone? How do I fill the photocopier? How do I handle the post? That stuff. At a level 2, it's transactional and reactive. That is where you're told what to do and you go and do it. It's probably the secretarial role of old, and it is basic travel and email management and basic calendar management and maybe doing some expenses. Level 3 is where you're starting to learn more about the business. You're moving from transactional to strategic, from reactive to proactive. So you're understanding what your executives' goals and KPIs are. You're starting to question things. So whereas at a level 2, if I was to go to your assistant and say, I need a meeting for 30 minutes, they'd probably look in the calendar and go, there's 30 minutes I'm putting you in. At a level 3, they would be going, okay, what is the meeting for? Does it need an agenda? How long does it need to be? Does it really need to be the 30 minutes? Does it need to be a meeting at all? But I think they really need to understand your goals and your KPIs and what success looks like at that level, and also what you're trying to achieve. Because I think when they understand the organization, they're going to be able to serve you at a much higher level. And then at a level 4, you're a leader in your own right. You're entirely strategic, you're fully proactive, you're driving the agenda within the organization. You're probably at C-suite or looking after board level, but you are maybe leading a team of assistants. You are certainly there sitting on the leadership team as a leader in your own right. And it may be even that the assistant that's at a level 4 is having input into what your goals and KPIs are as a leader. So why have I got a chief of staff on there? Especially as I don't think it's a shoo-in for assistants. It's there because, like everything else in our great profession, what we're seeing is that organisations are giving assistants at a high level the title of chief of staff without understanding what it really is, because they don't know how else to promote them. So I included it because I want you to understand what it is. Go take a look at it. For most assistants, that level 4 is the highest they're ever going to get. And we need to be talking about how to make assistants more high powered and how we promote them within the profession, rather than giving them titles because it's a watered down version, but we want to be able to promote them. That, by the way, is the level that the Bureau of Labour Statistics recognises. The rest of them don't appear. And I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail. I'm sure your assistant will watch this as well, and I'm sure they'll download it for you, or you can download it, as I said, from globalskillsmatrix.com. But I did want to show you it isn't complicated. You basically start at level 1. As you're moving up, you're taking the skills with you, and it all fits on one page. Of course, some organisations might only have 2 and 3, and that's absolutely fine. But at least everybody knows what excellence looks like, and they know what they have to do in order to get to the next level. And every assistant role is different, so you're going to create your own. But this is a starting point. It's a framework. And the only other thing I would say is that it could be that your assistant is a level 3 and they don't want to move up to a level 4. Or maybe you have some assistants that are level 2 and they want to be just transactional and reactive. And that's fine. But what we're all aiming at, isn't it, is a world-class administrative function, which is underpinning everything that your stakeholders, you as stakeholders, are doing. So let's make sure that we understand what excellence looks like at each level. There are the tasks that run alongside it, by the way, and I've just finished putting together the competencies. So if anybody is interested in those, you're most welcome to write to us and we'll get those sent to you. Let me give you a quick case study at this point. It's only a couple of slides, but it is really important to show you what this can actually mean for your organization in terms of money, because I think that's what we're interested in, isn't it? What it's going to do for the bottom line, what it's going to do for our organization. And so this is one of the organizations I worked with. They had 500 assistants. None of them had been employed through HR. They'd all been employed through the executives. So there were over 60 job titles across the organization, and there was no structure and no training and no consistent job descriptions, and therefore no performance review. It actually took us a year to track down all of their assistants. And they came to us and they said, so how are we going to create a structure of levels for our administrative function, which is going to bring order to the relatively chaotic way in which we're currently employing and training and promoting our assistants? And they also wanted us to take into account that currently they had a performance review system, which had everybody at a level 1 to 9, but it was based entirely on individual opinion. And it didn't really fit into what the admins did. And it was usually based on people judging them who had no experience of administration at all. So we don't really want assistants being promoted because she's a nice girl and she does my calendar nicely. What we wanted was a situation where everybody had a level playing field and were very clear about the skills that they needed and the competencies they needed to work on in order to make them exceptional. So the new structure and training program that we put into place did all sorts of things. First of all, it brought clarity to the organisation on the return on investment and the value to the organisation of each admin. And coming out of COVID, all organisations that I'm talking to have been tasked with working out what the value is of each employee. And for the first time, this is including the admin, which is very exciting. It meant they suddenly had pay that was based on performance, not on tenure. So pay grades were based on the level achieved rather than the time served or the executive's personal preference. And I'm not saying that if an assistant has been there for a very long time, they shouldn't get their annual review and maybe a small pay rise if they've been there a long time. But if you want to be promoted, let's understand what that looks like. We are going very shortly to have the ability to test via an app that we are building. It's costing me a fortune, so that you can see what you've got in terms of assistants at what level and where their skills gaps are. But currently we're having to do that manually. That piece of technology will be available later this year, and organizations are going to be able to see at a granular level each assistant and what level they are and where the skills gaps are, and hopefully train them. You're going to be able to do it yourself if you want to have a look at it, but also they'll be able to go, for example, look, here is a level 3. Here is the level 3s that we are employing. What is the training that they need? Rather than going, oh, what shall we do for the assistants this year? Maybe they'd like some PowerPoint training. I'm telling you, they don't want PowerPoint training. They want leadership. They want partnership. They want collaboration. They want project management. For them, their recruitment costs went down because the retention was up and they were attracting better candidates because word got round pretty quickly that they were investing in their assistants. They aligned the skills of the assistants with the needs of the organisation. We always start off by going, what have we got in terms of executives at each level? So at a C-suite or a board level, we probably need 1-to-1, 1-to-2 ratio. At the next level down, where we have middle management, maybe we need a 1 assistant looking after 3 or 4 executives. The average now at that level is 4. And then maybe what I'm seeing is, for many organizations, they're putting a pool together of people who are those level 2 assistants so they can do the task-based reactive stuff. And that will feed into what the assistants are trying to do, but also what you're trying to do. So you can go to them directly if you want a flight booked or if you want your expenses doing, and that task-based reactive stuff. And so getting that structure in place meant that they eliminated hours for the executives, and that dropped directly to the bottom line. Some other benefits: it streamlined performance review, of course. It meant for the first time there was succession planning and they could develop a clear career progression for their assistants. So now everybody has a roadmap of what excellence looks like at each level, and then they can establish these clear goals and KPIs for their assistants so everybody knows where they stand. They, of course, were then creating a roadmap for training and development, so the assistants got the training they needed in order to make the executives exceptional. And there was clarity for the first time of the role of each employee. So proper job descriptions based on competencies, rather than something really generic with a line at the bottom that says, and anything else we might like to throw at you. So this organisation is now entering all sorts of HR-based awards for innovation because it's working so beautifully. And just as a side, this organisation didn't have any level 1 assistants, and we have a foundation that we work with in South Africa where we take kids out of the townships and we train them to be assistants for a year, and then we find them work. And it occurred to me very early on that administration is a really great way to get people who, particularly women, who are not terribly educated out of poverty, because you don't need qualifications to be an assistant at the lowest level, but you can grow your career if you work hard and therefore elevate yourself and elevate your family. So I suggested to this organisation that maybe they would like to put a level 1 in there and employ a few people from a local basis who maybe otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to be employed at an establishment like theirs. They've done it. So wonderful. It fits into their corporate social responsibility area. And there's really tangible results on this. Just look at the figures, because admittedly, this was an organization that was paying its entry-level managers a large amount of money. It was a scientific-based organization, and it being America, they were working for 50 weeks a year. But look, we found that if an assistant saved each of these entry-level managers, there were over 1,000 of them, 1 hour a day, it equated to $88,600 in savings a week. And that was before we looked at the higher level managers and what they were paid. It's before we looked at what the management would spend their time doing in that time saved that might generate revenue. And this is before we looked at what the actual amount of time was that fully trained assistants would be able to save their executives every day. Then there were recruitment savings. And we found the superstar assistants who were currently hidden, who could be used more effectively. On the flip side of that, by the way, we also found about a fifth of the assistants that they employed were retired in situ. In other words, they had between 1 and 5 years to go before they were retiring and didn't want to get with the program at all and were sitting there and waiting for retirement. So think about how much that costs the business and what that does to the bottom line when you're not identifying them and making sure that they get with the program. So if you want more information on Global Skills Matrix, there's loads of it, and it's all free, but you can download the report or the executive summary, which is only 5 pages if you don't have time to look at the whole thing, but you can go to globalskillsmatrix.com and you can take a look at that. So I think if we're going back to the AI piece and the fact that we're being told that AI is going to take people's jobs, I don't think it's going to. I think humans that understand AI are going to replace humans that don't have AI. And I think for most of your assistants, AI is going to be amazing because it's going to free them up to do more of the things that you need them to do. I recently sat through a presentation in New Zealand where I saw a group of assistants who walked into the room looking really quite nervous because it was a 2-hour session on AI, and I could see that they were thinking, oh, okay, how's this going to go with our role? But they came out of it so excited because they could see very clearly where it was going to add bandwidth to them and take away a lot of the boring stuff and free them up to doing the stuff that you need them to do. So then the robots are coming. They do want to take the assistants' jobs in part, but really the bits of the job that they don't want to do anyway. And really, if they use it properly, it's going to mean that the organization benefits. So I would be getting them training probably in AI or Copilot or whatever it happens to be that you're using at your organization. And then there was COVID, of course, and everything has just changed. So office life is never going to be the same again. And really, as we're coming out of COVID, organizations are asking themselves, as I said, how they can better utilize every member of staff. And for the first time, that's including the assistants. And every organization is in a state of disruption right now, whether that's huge disruption or a tiny amount. And while we are in this state of disruption, maybe we should take the opportunity to look at how we're utilizing our assistants properly so that we're no longer at that ridiculous stat that we had, that number of them that are feeling so underutilized. Your assistants are chaos tamers, and organizations really need that. Get them working on your process, get them working on your procedure, get them working on work that maybe you'd never thought of giving them. Because I'm encouraged them all the time to look at the work like a metaphorical pile of papers. So what should happen is they should be leading up. They should be looking at the work and they should be going, well, that one I can do for sure. And this next one, I can probably do a third of that. So I'm going to do that, but then I'm going to give the rest of it to them. And this one I don't understand at all. So I'm going to take that to them, but I am going to ask them what it means so that next time I can have a greater input. As I said earlier, if you can both do something, it should be the assistant that's doing it. The organization is paying you your salary to get on with the work that only you can do. That's why they're there. And they are the expert at being the assistant. You are not. If you buy into the thought that the organization is employing them, you're not employing them, let them do the job. They're a subject matter expert in their field. And really, just like finance are subject matter experts, and so are sales, and so are marketing, they really understand what they're doing. Let them free up your time. You know, when I first got an assistant, I had absolutely no clue how to use her at all. And I'm sure for most of you, you're the same. I was delighted because it was a real kind of status symbol for me. But I still had imposter syndrome about being a manager. And I can remember sitting there thinking, I know it's 9 o'clock at night, but actually this is my work. I can't give it to them to do because if I do, I'm being lazy. And so the result was that I burnt out and she was bored witless. And actually, if the two of us had just had a conversation about what she was capable of doing, It would have done so much for my mental health and for my ability to do the job properly, because I wouldn't have been working till 9 o'clock every night, and I might just occasionally have seen my children. You can do these things. Of course you can do these things. But in the long term, the assistants aren't going to be doing them either, and neither should you. It's all going to go to AI. What's the point in managing your own calendar or booking your own travel or managing your own email or your own expenses? Your assistant can do that for you, and they're experts at doing it. Let them do it. And a word to the wise, by the way, nobody other than your assistant should have access to your calendar. Why? Because they manage your time. That's their role, to manage your time. How can they manage your time if everybody can throw things on your calendar, including you? My assistant says to me all the time, if I go and I put something on my calendar, she is step away from the calendar. That's my domain. Because she's always got so many pencils on it, she manages that thing within an inch of its life. And it's wonderful, because what it means is it frees me up to talk to people about other things. Let me talk to you very quickly then, just to reiterate about the fact that with the Global Skills Matrix, what we're looking at is the level 1 and 2 probably going in the long term, because as AI progresses, that transactional reactive stuff will go. So what we're looking at is 3, 4, and 5. 3, 4, and 5 are the ones that will remain. That's where we're going to find the work for the assistants to do. But what does that look like? Well, it used to be that assistants were reactive and they worked in silos, and it was all skills-based and subservient, and they were given tasks and they weren't meant to question anything, and it was very much, I don't think that's my job and I don't think that's my place. But now assistants are proactive. They really understand the organization. They understand the business. You know, there's a great deal of difference between knowing and understanding, and most of your assistants know a lot about the organization, but they don't necessarily understand it. And they're going to be a much more use to you if you help them to understand it better. It's communication based. Where it goes wrong is where the communication breaks down. You need to be talking to your assistant every day. I'm going to come on to that in a moment. It's about leadership and collaboration. Leadership so that they lead up, they show you what is needed. I'll talk more about collaboration too before we're done. And most assistants now are running projects. They're doing data analysis, they're doing research, they're building briefing documents, and they're asking lots of questions around where they can add more value and take on greater responsibility so that they can make a greater, more confident contribution to the organization. And I'm not talking about more work now. They have plenty of that. I'm talking about utilizing them in a different way so that you're freed up to do more of the things that you need to do. We have to stop thinking about them as gatekeepers of people and start thinking about them as gatekeepers of time. There's another wonderful trainer by the name of Laura Belgrado, and she says that one day she was rummaging around on her executive's desk and she came across his wage slip. And she said she thought two things. The first was, I used to feel sorry for you, but not anymore. The second was, I'm managing you all wrong. Because in her head, she'd seen immediately how much he was worth an hour. And she realized that if she shaved 5 minutes off here and 20 minutes off there and 30 minutes off there, it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes of his salary that was dropping directly to the bottom line. So she started trying to work out how she could manage his time better and how she could push back on things and how she could manage his calendar so that he was getting to the things that he needed to do, but in a timely fashion. This is Jeff Hoffman. Now, some of you will know Jeff, but actually he is behind Priceline.com and Booking.com, and he used to organise most of Evander Holyfield's fights and most of Elton John's tours, and he's worth a fortune. But he does speak on the circuit for administrative professionals because his assistant, he says, was instrumental in him building his massive business. And sadly, she was killed in a car crash several years ago, and so he speaks to honour her. But I love this story. It really illustrates his point. What he says is that one day he went to dinner with an eminent heart surgeon friend of his. And when he got there, his friend was doing his calendar. And he said to his friend, Carl, what are you doing? And Carl said, well, I'm doing my calendar. And Carl said, Jeff said to him, but aren't you worth $500 an hour? Now, Jess says if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. Just think about that for 1 minute. If you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. So how many things are you currently doing for yourself where the organization is paying out your salary for you to do them, where your assistant should be doing them for you? Do you see what I'm saying? Here's a really good example. And this is from a company called Work Without Walls. And what it says is that when it did its research, it found that most people spend 4 hours a day in meetings. They spend 3.2 hours a day dealing with email, and that's if you only get 100 messages a day. And that leaves only 1.4 hours to do everything else, including the work. And they also say that the average executive spends 58% of their time on email. That's 58% of your salary that is being spent on you doing email. I have a triage system, which I'm going to send out afterwards, which will take that down to 12% of your time. Nothing will ever be deleted. You will still be in control, and your assistant will manage it for you. It gives you back 46% of your time. Shall we try it? Here's another great one. So somebody writes to me and they say, hey, Lucy, we'd like a meeting with you. I go back and I say, of course, I would love to have a meeting with you because that's brand, right? And I'm sure most of you would do exactly the same. But I also say, I'm copying my assistant Jermaine in because if I don't, she will kill me. If I start playing with my calendar, she will kill me. And that is true. She will kill me. Am I right, Jermaine? So somewhere then, underneath the signature where nobody looks is a number between 1 and 5. And if you are a number 1, it means you'll have a meeting with me sometime this week. If it's a 5, it will be a cold day in hell before you get a meeting with me. There's then another number, which is 15 or 30 or 40 or 50, whatever it happens to be. But that's the amount of time I want the meeting for. Now, just think about it. How much time over the course of a year do you think we save by not having to have those conversations about, I see you want a meeting with so-and-so, and how long do you want it to be, and how important is it? Saves us a load of time. It's so efficient. I want to talk to you for a minute about managing up. And I think most of your assistants believe that managing up is bad. They think that if they're trying to manage up, you're going to think that they're getting above their station. Or maybe you'll think that they think you're not doing your job properly. And actually, if you let them manage up, it's so freeing. Jermaine tells me regularly she's got me. It's like having a safety net under a trapeze. She's got me. And what she is saying to me is, I will put everything in place so all you have to do is to go and do the thing. And that means that I can run around the world like I do, talking at the number of events that I do, because I know that she and the rest of the people in the office have got me. And the trust is total, to a point where quite recently I went to the airport to go and check in to go on a flight to America. And they said, oh, Mrs. Brazier, where are you going this morning? I said, you know, I have no idea. And I really didn't. But I did know that if I went into my bag, I would have all the details and all the documentation as to exactly where I was going, because Jermaine had got that. Okay, I do want to talk to you very briefly about collaboration because I think there's something very specific for assistants here, and it's the buzzword in all the documentation I'm seeing about the future of work. And I wanted to give you a really easy analogy that would help you to understand why it's different from the way we used to work. And the analogy I'm going to use is putting on a theatrical play. So in the past, what would happen is you would have a team of people who were putting on this play. So you would have people who were in charge of costumes or lighting or sound, and you probably have stage managers. And of course, you would have the actors, and then you would have the director. And nobody particularly has to like the director. They just have to do what they're told. And in the end, they achieve the goal that the director had in mind, and the play gets achieved. Collaboration is entirely different because it isn't just working together, it's thinking together. And it's about everybody bringing their skill sets to the table and utilizing them for the good of the organization. So the end product is going to come from the efforts of the group. On the first morning, all those people would sit down together and say, how can we build the best play that we can possibly build? Now, you have to be clear on the goal, because if you're not clear on the goal, it's absolute chaos. But for an assistant, the thing with this is that it's about you being equal partners. You've just got different skill sets. Think back to Belbin and what I was telling you. It's about trust and respect. It's about the two of you understanding what the goal is and working out together what the best result is for the organization and letting go of ego. And it's got to be creative and flexible, give and take, because otherwise it's never going to work. But whereas it used to be that the executive was up here and the assistant was down here, and it was very much a master and servant relationship, collaboration for an assistant and executive is about the two of you working together towards a common goal to make it happen and bringing your skill sets to the table. So let's talk then in the last 10 minutes about how you build this really powerful business partnership for both of you. And the first thing that I would say is that you need regular meetings. So why have I got nuns here? Well, that's because I was brought up Catholic, and so every morning we went to morning prayer and we got set for the day. And I think it had far more to do with that than it had to do with actually praying. But my morning meetings with my assistant are called our morning prayers, and it is 10 minutes every day. Because how can she go and look after me and make me the best that I can possibly be unless she understands what my priorities are for the day? So that 10 minutes is a touch base. It's a let's go through what's happened since yesterday. I'm going to show you in a minute what that looks like. But 10 minutes a day also means that nobody's going to come wanting that meeting. If it's an hour a week, they more often than not give that meeting away to somebody else who's coming saying, I desperately need an hour. And anyway, come on, if you're like me, an hour of doing administrative detail is like pulling teeth, isn't it? Wouldn't you rather just have 10 minutes a day, so you're getting into a rhythm with your assistant and talking to them so that they can get on with their job, which after all is to make you look amazing. So here are the things we discuss in our morning prayers. We look at the daily calendar, what's happening today. Are we got anything on there that is not clear for her or not clear for me? We look at email communications that have come in that maybe we want to clarify if there's any misunderstanding. Is there anything going on in the organisation that I need to know about? What are the status updates since yesterday? Is there any upcoming travel that I need to know details on? What are follow-up items from yesterday? And if she's working on any special projects, we'll do that. Occasionally we'll have a longer meeting if she's working on something particularly, but 9 times out of 10, everything falls into those 10-minute meetings. And that also means she doesn't have to keep interrupting you all day, or he doesn't have to keep interrupting you all day. I'm so sorry to our male assistants. I am terrible at leaving you out when I'm doing these things, but you know, she is 98%. So for me, you don't want those interruptions all day long with them saying, what do you mean by this? Or emailing you about things. If it's really urgent, Jermaine will WhatsApp me because then I know the world's burning down. But other than that, she saves it for our morning meetings. So we have our quick catch up and she can get on with her role. You know, it used to be that an assistant would be running along behind this arrow or alongside this arrow. You, as the executive, would be given the goal, and then you would go on this emotional and intellectual journey and you would end up with success. Or not, but we hope with success. And your assistant would be going, hey, what work have you for me? I don't really understand it, but tell me what you want me to do and I will do it. The future has got to be, doesn't it, that you're given the goal and the two of you work on it together so that they're bringing their skill set to the table and you're going through that emotional and intellectual journey together so that you hit success together. And a great way for your assistant to start to really understand about the organisation is to help them to participate in leadership meetings. You know, Richard Branson's assistant, Helen Clark, sits in all of his leadership meetings, and not to take the minutes. She's there because she wants to watch what he is agreeing to do. And she takes note of that and she calendars it. It means he can be entirely present in the meeting because he doesn't have to take notes. She also watches what everybody else in the room is agreeing to do. And if it affects Richard's work, she's chasing them to make sure they're delivering in a timely fashion. She's watching body language to see whether anybody didn't quite get it so that he can go and fill them in and reiterate things if he needs to. But she's looking at what's coming down the track. She is looking at where there might be bottlenecks. She is getting to know the leadership team so that she has problems to be solved. She knows who to go to. And most importantly, she is learning how to speak the language of business so that she is able to have the conversations that she needs to. You know, your assistant probably knows what they want to say, but in most cases, they're not clear on what the language of business is, so they don't say it because they don't want to be seen as being stupid. Have them there. They'll take on stuff by osmosis. I'm telling you now, the number of times you come out of a meeting and they say, is there anything in there for me? And you say, yes, I'll talk to you about it later. And you give them 2 or 3 bullet points, and they know if they'd been there, they would have had 100 things on their list and they could have managed you within an inch of your life. Let them do it. It's going to free you up to be able to do the work you need to do. So that takes a different skill set. It means you need a mindset shift. You should be, as an assistant, thinking about being in those meetings as being inspiring and an education. It really helps them to grow their network. It helps them to solve problems. And in the end, it also helps them to be a better partner to you and to be able to make a more confident contribution. So I want you to think a little bit coming off this presentation as to how else you can help them to anticipate. What are ways that you can make sure that they're in the loop? What things should they be reading? If they have access to your inbox, for example, my assistants say my sent emails keep them totally in the loop. They don't have to keep asking me questions, but maybe they can read summaries of board reports. Maybe they can set meetings with other assistants to make sure that they're getting the inside information on what's happening with the entire leadership team. Have a think with them, have a conversation with them about how they can get more involved. Oh, and then time boxing and a to-do list. I hate to-do lists with a passion because to-do lists are like Medusa, aren't they? You cut one thing off them and 5 grow back. So my assistant has changed my life totally by implementing time boxing, and I love it. The first thing she did was to put lunch in there because I would get very regularly to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and be feeling very peculiar and think, oh, I've missed lunch. That's why I'm feeling peculiar. Okay. Now lunch pops up and I go, I'd better go get a sandwich. The other thing that we have done is we have said, okay, Mondays and Fridays are days I don't do meetings. That's because they're the days that I do the work. Because how often are you doing back-to-back meetings and then you're staying late in the office because you have no time to do the work? And finally, the third thing that they've done is to put time in between each of the meetings on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And we're a 24-hour-a-day business, really, so I don't mind how long those meetings run for during the day. But there's research from Microsoft that I came across that showed that when you do back-to-back meetings, your brain is orange and red and angry. And when you are doing meetings with breaks in between, your brain is green and blue and happy. And so think about it. You're in a meeting, you're doing a meeting, you're excited about it, you've got all sorts of ideas. And if you come out of that meeting and you go to the next meeting, it doesn't matter how many notes you've taken, all those ideas you've got, all the things that are creative, go, because now you're focused on the next one. So now I have 20 minutes in between each meeting where I can write it up on the CRM system, I can allocate tasks to people, and then I know the work that I've got to do. Plus, it makes me look really efficient because I'm able to say to people in those meetings, I'll get that to you by the end of Monday. And I do, because I have Monday to do the work. It means less meetings, but far more effective, far more efficient meetings. You've got to trust them. You know, to be truly successful, executive assistants have to step out of their comfort zone, and you have to be willing to delegate. If you don't do that, they're never going to get to a point where they can be a strategic administrative partner to you and really support you in the way that you need them to. So sit them down directly after this and go through your goals and KPIs with them. Talk to them about what success looks like for you this year. Talk to them about what you're trying to achieve so that they can align their work with what you need them to do. And help them to change their mindset. We don't want them to be reactive and thinking, how will next year be different? We want them to be thinking, what must we do differently? We don't want them just surviving. We want them thriving and to see themselves as leaders, not followers. If they get it right, they have a really clear direction and they're traveling without that rather than traveling without a map, and they're asking what if rather than what next. Don't we want them to see the endless possibilities as to how they can support you rather than have limited choices so that they can raise the bar rather than just problem solving? Let's help them to put a focused action plan in place to make you amazing rather than sitting there feeling overwhelmed with tasks. And I think the most important thing is that we've got to stop thinking about them and I and start thinking about us and we. We're a team. We're driving forward the business and hitting goals together. So here's just a couple of things before I finish, which I think you'll find interesting. This year, particularly coming out of COVID, your organizations are telling us some interesting things. And for the first time, they're really thinking about the administrative functions. And this is what they're telling us. How do we create a structure for the administrative function which brings order to the relatively chaotic way in which assistants are currently employed, trained and promoted? How do we monitor performance to stop it being based on opinion rather than fact? How do we make sure that the right executives are having the right assistants? How do we make sure that executives are using their assistants properly? How are we ensuring that we're getting return on investment from our administrative function? And that we have clarity on the value that each assistant is bringing to the business? And finally, how do we ensure that there are clear goals and KPIs for each admin? You know, this is what your assistants tell me all the time. I want to be included and treated as a core part of the business, not sit on the outside and be seen as just an assistant. We know that that takes work. They're going to have to do the work, but you're going to have to give them the opportunity, and it will be transformative both for you and for your organization. And I truly believe that if assistants are utilized properly, you can change the economy of your business. So this is the final thing I'm going to leave you with to think about. Do they need their own department or their own function? Because right now they are, as I said at the beginning, sat right the way across the organization. They're in silos. They have lunch and learns occasionally. If you've got some people who campaign within your business to get the assistants together, they might have a network that shares some best practice. But you know, if they had their own department, their own function, all of a sudden there's structure, there's leadership, so that you're saying, when I'm big, I want to be that person. And the leader should be somebody who really understands administration and how the organization can utilize them best. You have proper performance review, you have goals and KPIs for your administrative professionals, and you can measure the performance so that you can improve it. Because that's what you want, isn't it? The best administrative function that you can possibly have, rather than people floundering around on their own, not sure of what they're meant to be doing and doing their best, but being incredibly frustrated because they're not being utilized properly. If you want to talk to me about any of this, I'm really, really happy to do so. Just book an appointment with my team and we'll fix a time. Jermaine, I know you're going pale at this point, but I shall look forward to talking to any of you that want to do that. So I'm going to leave you then with my very favourite quote in the world, which says that 20 years from now, you're going to be far more disappointed by the things that you didn't do rather than the things that you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbour, catch the trade wind in your sails, explore, dream and discover. Thank you all very much for spending time with me. A very happy Administrative Professionals Day to all of the assistants that joined. If you're an executive, I hope it's given you some wonderful ideas to go away and start using your assistants in a more effective way. But I wish you all the best with your partnerships. I hope that this webinar has been as transformative and energizing as I felt giving it, and have a wonderful day. Thank you all very much.